am qualified to be talking about that. Um, my experience in SEO started 8 years ago. And since then, I've worked almost exclusively with startups of varying sizes. Most of my clients were and still are SaaS companies, which usually have a very good product, but do need help with SEO and their overall messaging because their ideal customers don't really know how to reach them, or once they are on the website, they simply don't convert. Um, I've done everything from agency work to direct work with SaaS startups, so I know quite a bit about where those problems usually lie. In my experience, the reason that these companies struggle comes down to the same thing, which is that their website messaging and their overall messaging simply isn't specific enough. And you might wonder how messaging works into SEO, because isn't SEO just getting people to come to your website? But in my opinion, SEO is more than that, because if you're getting the wrong kinds of people to get to your website, they're not very likely to convert. And then you don't get much from SEO as such. And traffic visits don't pay the bills on their own. You need those conversions. So it's about attracting the right audience. People who are interested in your product and people who are at the right stage and ready to buy your product if they think that it's a good fit and it can solve their problems. And once you have their interest, unless they convert, then they'll likely leave your website not very interested, and it'll be more difficult to get to them later on. The analogy that I like to lead with is that I don't know if any of you have gone fishing before, but even if you haven't, you will likely answer this question correctly, which is, if you are fishing, would you be using the same bait for every type of fish? And all of you will likely say no, because different types of fish require different kinds of bait, and there's a whole science behind that. But this is the thing that I have seen happen with virtually all startups, all SaaS clients that I worked with, which is that they have this passion and knowledge that they have incorporated into their product, and they are trying to reach as many people as possible. But many of those simply aren't their ideal audience. And other times, even if they are, they're simply not at a stage where they're ready to buy yet. And by the time they are at that stage, the initial messaging that got to them is now suddenly targeting someone else. They end up being confused and not purchasing the product after all. Recent studies show that your customers, your potential customers, need to see your name, your product's name, pop up as many as 25 or even 30 times, not just through your website, but socials, ads, any place really, in order for them to start trusting your product and to start trusting you enough to buy from you. But many of the companies that I worked with, once they saw very few leads from the audience that they were initially targeting, they would suddenly switch to a different audience, and they would end up losing that first batch of people who were initially interested but didn't get to see them enough times in order to convert. I will give you a couple of examples. One of the first clients that I worked with had LinkedIn scraping software, and all of their messaging revolved around find your target leads, get to leads you can't get to with other tools, best scraping software for B2B companies. And if you've been following me on LinkedIn, maybe you already know where the room for improvement in these taglines lies, which is that they're talking to everyone at the same time, because a B2B company is a very wide net. It consists of startups, of unicorns, of companies with 500 employees, 10 employees, those suffering from geo restrictions or other sorts of restrictions. So just trying to target everyone at the same time is kind of futile. So once we started working together, we decided to change those taglines and to just zero in on the right audience, on just one audience for starters. And the clients that I work with usually aren't on board at first, because they think the wider they cast their net, the more customers they're going to get. But it's actually the other way around, because you want to zero in on the right audience. We eventually agreed, gave that one, what I like to call micro audience, 6 months, and they saw 30% more sales during those 6 months with a far smaller audience. After those 6 months, once we already had a loyal base in that audience, which is enough for word of mouth, testimonials, case studies, that's how we ensured that they kept coming and that they kept spreading the word to more people from that audience. That's when we decided to move forward and switch to a different audience. What we didn't do was mix and match and kind of throw all these different messages at different little audiences, hoping that they will stick. Because if someone keeps on seeing you pop up, but only 3 out of the 30 messages speak to them, they're not very likely to think that your product is the right product for them. So the first insight that I would like you to walk away with today is that less is more when you're crafting your messaging and when you're choosing your audience. Another issue that I saw in one of my more recent clients is that they were spending $5,000 a month on an agency which kept bringing in leads, but they simply didn't go far enough to turn into customers. And having worked at several agencies, I knew what the likely problem was, which is if you're a startup, 5,000 is a lot for you on a monthly level. But for even like a mid-sized agency, that's really not a lot. You're likely at the bottom of their paying list. And they're likely to focus on clients paying far more, like 15K or 20K a month. And what they do for you will likely get delegated to the end of the week or the end of the month, and it will get delegated to junior writers who are very far removed from your initial message. Because the way it works at agencies is that obviously the CMO will kind of onboard you, try to understand your product, pain points, your ideal audience. Then they'll delegate that to the content manager. And then the content manager will delegate it usually to the junior writers if the more senior writers are working with the bigger companies. And what happens is that you will still be getting those 30 pages from the agency showing you the CTR growth, the website growth, the traffic growth. But like I said before, traffic doesn't pay the bills. And the issue here is that by the time that your product and message and audience reach the junior writer, the message gets very watered down, and the junior writer is simply writing briefs that they get from their content manager. They don't get to understand your product and to understand how to write for your ideal audience. So the solution to this is to have someone who is very on the inside of your product, if that makes sense, who understands the product firsthand, who's there with you to understand the product and the message that it should be conveying. And when this happens, usually with my clients, they notice that the sales have flatlined, even though they're working with an agency, they're doing their best. Usually what they try to do is they go, okay, we need more traffic, or we need to pour more money into ads, or we will hire an agency to scale our lead generation. And I understand where that's coming from, because you might be thinking, okay, if we can get in front of more people, we are going to get more customers. But it's kind of like trying to fix a leaky bucket by pouring in more water, because if your messaging is the same and the audience is the same, you'll simply, okay, you might be getting more traffic, but the number of buying customers, of those who actually convert, will likely stay roughly the same. Another startup, a couple of startups that I worked with were developing productivity tools, but this specific one had a very solid product. I remember their sales had hit a wall, and they decided to counter that by doubling their ad spend. Their traffic did go up 60% during that month, but their conversion saw zero change. And like I said before, it was because their landing page simply wasn't speaking to the right person. Their overall messaging wasn't speaking to the right person, because even if you have visibility, if your message isn't relevant to the people who are seeing you, it's just not enough. Overall, more traffic won't fix broken messaging. That's the bottom line. It will just give you more people to confuse. And the real problem lying in the heart of it all is that most SaaS companies, and I'm sorry, this is going to sound a little bit evil, but they just sound like everyone else, because their messaging is so broad. It's like they're trying to shout in a stadium. They're not talking to one single person. And another analogy I like to use here is that if you ever see a person who is injured in the street, the person who are trying to help them will usually just shout, "Someone call the ambulance." And in a lot of cases, no one will call the ambulance because everyone thinks that you're talking to someone else and that someone else is going to do it. What you need to do is just say, "You, the person in the red jacket, you call the ambulance." And that already makes a difference. And it works pretty much the same when it comes to SaaS companies, especially startups. So when you say, for example, when your headline says best tool for B2B companies, you probably think you're being inclusive, that you're casting a wide net, but just think about all the potential people who are inside that net that you're hoping to cast. The 3-person startup probably thinks that you're built for enterprise, and the enterprise buyer probably thinks that you sound too small and that you're not the right fit for them. I recently had a client who was in the analytics space who used the tagline, "Understand your users better." And if you're at all connected to marketing, then you probably see this kind of messaging 5 times a month, and none of it sticks because every time it sounds the same. So when we drill down into it, try to kind of freshen it up a bit, we talked to their current customers, and we found that most of them were actually non-technical founders who really appreciated seeing which features their customers loved without having to dive into like 50-page dashboards and colorful graphs. So instead, just instead of their initial headline, "Understand your users better," we decided to start posting, "See your top performing features at a glance, no code, no setup, everywhere." And I don't just mean the headline on the website. I mean, everything has to go into this. So the blog posts, social media posts, ads, everything needs to be in line with this message. And that was the only thing we changed, the messaging all over the place. And they saw a 12% jump in customers in just 2 months. Not because they had more ads or because they spent more, but because they spent smarter and changed their messaging. Because let's face it, your customers are busy people. Everyone is busy nowadays, and they simply don't have the time to sit around and to try and figure out if your product is right for them. The fact is that it needs to speak to them right away. Otherwise, it's just not going to stick because we have so many products, so many services all over the place, and it's the messaging that makes the biggest difference. So the process that I walk every SaaS founder through once we start working together is, first we define what I call a micro audience, but founders don't usually like that word because it makes it sound like we're targeting 12 people. Which I like to pose it as this: if you ultimately want to get to 5,000 customers, let's start with the first 500 customers first. So define your first audience and ask yourself who exactly has the problem that you can solve right now. And I can guarantee you it's not B2B companies. It might be early stage founders who are running outbound campaigns manually. Narrowing down is the very first step. The next one is to unpack their pain points, which is trying to understand what's frustrating them today, what's costing them time or money, because you'll see most of the time it will be about saving time or saving money, just in different ways. For example, one client I had offering LinkedIn outreach software, and they initially thought that the pain point of their target audience was we can't find leads, but that was very broad. So we spent some time on it, and it turned out that the actual pain point was we spend 3 hours a day cleaning data manually, which is a lot different than we can't find leads, which is something that any outreach software can kind of say, okay, we will help you find more leads, but how will you help me solve my specific problem? So that's the line that actually grabbed their audience. We spend 3 hours a day cleaning data manually. We can save you those 3 hours, and that's what made the difference. So from there, once you have the specific pain points, you will want to create messaging for that one group everywhere. Every page that you're working on, every piece of content. Don't fall into the trap of saying, okay, but maybe just this one blog post can target someone else. Not yet. It will confuse your initial audience. Every piece of content that you create from there on should make that one person feel seen and like your product or service can solve that problem for them. So as part of this webinar, I told you I will help you understand how you can fix your top 3 blog posts and improve them so they're actually communicating the right thing to the right audience. So some of the examples are, if you have a blog post that says 10 productivity hacks, and a bunch of SaaS companies do, no matter what you're selling, it's always the 10 productivity hacks, which again could speak to anyone in the known universe. Instead of 10 productivity hacks, you can say how to save 3 hours a day on cleaning data. Or if you're selling software, time tracking software for freelancers, for example, it could be how to save 2 hours a day, but get paid more. Something like that, something that will make it far more specific than the 10 productivity hacks. Or if you have a blog on how to automate your growth, which again, a lot of SaaS companies that I work with do have some version of this blog on their website, you can turn how to automate your growth into how to clean up lead sheets in 15 minutes. I hope that you can already see how different and how more specific this is, and how someone who is struggling with this might be more likely to click and purchase if they see how to clean up lead sheets in 15 minutes or how to save 3 hours, rather than just seeing how to automate your growth, because that could be speaking to anyone. Or if you have some sort of a line that says our software helps you grow, you simply ask your people, are you tired of exporting 10 sheets a day just to reach new leads? You can automate it in one click. I hope you get the gist. So once you get that messaging down, it's very important to stay consistent. Like I said before, and I will drill this into the ground by the end of this webinar, but it does take people genuinely between 25 to 30 touch points to keep seeing your message everywhere in order for them to say, okay, these are the real deal and this sounds like an actually good product. And if you make 5 of those messages and then decide, okay, this isn't working, let's switch up the audience, and then again and again, you kind of reset that trust every single time, and you lose every part of the audience that you were initially starting to build. So once that sticks, usually after a couple of months, once you have enough customers to create case studies for word of mouth, for reviews, which will make sure to keep that kind of audience coming back, then you can go ahead and expand and add another audience into the mix. For example, I had a client, we were first targeting recruiters for a couple of months, then we expanded into sales teams, but it was only after they had enough clients from the first group and it made sense to do so. And it's kind of like if you're trying to take walking up the stairs and trying to take 5 steps at once. Unless you are some sort of a mega acrobat, it's not going to go well. You're going to do it far faster if you just go one by one. And essentially, when you align your messaging and audience, that's when you're going to start seeing some real change in your customer numbers. You are going to stop wasting money on what we marketers like to call vanity metrics, which is, okay, you have all this traffic, you have all these leads, but no one is converting. So you're going to stop wasting money on stuff that doesn't pay the bills. You will hopefully start to hear things like, I felt like you were describing my exact problem. I felt like you were just the thing that I was looking for to help me solve this problem. And every ad, email, and landing page will feel like a direct conversation rather than a broadcast. Because it was, once upon a time, it was kind of different, because you would see all these clever taglines, and the sales books were swearing by them. But that was way, way back. Nowadays, people really, even in the B2B space, people really want to feel like you are talking to them about their problem specifically. And you can expect to see conversions which are rising naturally and not depending on how much you can spend on ads during that specific period. I've genuinely seen founders go from conversion rates which were like 2 to 3% to 10% or more, which is what prompted me to name this webinar the way that I have. And it was simply because they zeroed in on their audience and they refined their message. I mean, don't be fooled. A lot of SEO went into that as well, because you can have the best message in the world, but if you don't know how to optimize those pages properly, not a lot of people are going to see them, which is why I like to say that SEO and messaging need to work together in order for this to work. And the important thing that you are going to gain from this is that marketing hopefully won't feel like a bother anymore. You won't have to go through 30 different pages of graphs and numbers and percentages. You won't have to guess what the next move should be. You will simply be solving your audience's pain points, and you will be able to understand how that's happening and where the growth is coming from. So if you are a SaaS founder who has some sort of a client base but is struggling to get more, I'm happy to talk more than just on this webinar. I can show where your messaging might be leaking potential sales and how you can fix it in a way that actually is sustainable. After this webinar, everyone who attended will get an invite link and a recording of this session, so you can always go through it again, or you can schedule a call with me if you want to talk more. I did get a couple of questions from a few people who are here today and some who I think couldn't make it. Some of those questions were more broadly about SEO or LinkedIn messaging, but they weren't entirely connected to today's topic. So for those questions, I may cover in one of the future webinars, but for today, I will just answer the questions which were in line with the webinar topic. So one of those messages was, how do I know if my messaging is too broad? One way to know this is if your homepage messaging could apply to virtually any SaaS, it's likely too broad. And I also like to give my founders this task, which is find 5 or 10 people who don't know your product, they don't know what it is about, and just show them the main message. And if they cannot guess what it is that the product does, it's definitely too broad, and you definitely want to narrow it down a bit or a lot. Can't I just target everyone and see who bites? This is also something that I go through, the first phase probably that I go through with my clients. And the answer is, like I said before with the fishing analogy, it's like throwing all of the bait you have and hoping something sticks. It ends up just being a waste of resources most of the time. And like I said before, people will not know who your product is really for or what it does. If you keep trying to get to everyone at the same time, people are going to be confused. It makes your content look very inconsistent, and ultimately it just lowers the trust that your customers need in order to purchase. The next question was one of my favorite ones that I also get. SEO is too slow. Shouldn't I just run ads instead? In general, I have nothing against ads when they make sense. But a lot of founders think if they invest more in ads, they're going to get more customers. And for a while, that might be true. But the issue with ads is when your budget runs out, the leads run out too, because the ad just stops showing. But if you invest in SEO in your overall messaging, hosting costs like something like maybe $200 a year, which is nothing compared to the amount a good ad will cost you. And once you have optimized that content in your message, it just stays there permanently. And it's a gift that keeps on giving, really. It is slower, but it is more consistent. And if you want to see really consistent growth, that's where SEO is far better than running a couple of ads until your budget runs out. What if I pick the wrong audience for my product? This is much easier if you already have a couple of customers, because you can always ask them what problem you're solving for them and why they decided to purchase. And that's basically how you know where to start and what kind of audience to target. The important thing is not to start thinking that you are targeting the wrong audience a couple of weeks in, because like I said before, it might not be that. It's more likely that it's just that people need to keep seeing you in order to trust you. And if you just switch up your audiences every couple of weeks, then you're going to gain nothing from it. But on an off case that it does turn out that you are targeting the wrong audience, maybe the market has changed, maybe you've introduced some new features to your product which completely switched which audience you should be targeting. If we are sure then that it makes sense, then we simply drop it and start targeting the audience that is currently a better fit for your product. Another one, I think I have two more. One is, how soon could we realistically see a 10% lift in sales? And this one depends a lot on your current baseline. But in my experience, given how long it takes for SEO to work, it's usually somewhere between 3 to 6 months. Could be sooner, could be more than that, again, depending on how niche your product or service is, who your audience is, stuff like that. But an average number from my experience is 3 to 6 months. And the final question that I received is, my SEO strategy involves link juice and authority. As more people search using AI, what will happen to SEO? Every SEO strategy should involve link building, as much as we may sometimes hate it, and authority. I think that the AI or the LLM talk ties into this pretty well, because for the time being, at least, you really can't expect more than 1% of your website audience to come from AI, from ChatGPT, from Gemini, places like that. So it's a very, very small number. It's definitely not enough for you to be changing your entire SEO strategy. But also, good SEO works both for Google, Bing, etc., and for LLMs, because they rely on the same things, which is the quality of your content, your online presence. The only difference that I've been noticing so far is that, for example, ChatGPT doesn't care that much about backlinks. It cares about naked mentions, about unlinked brand mentions all over the place, usually forums, user-generated content, but also websites which are trustworthy. So my suggestion is to kind of mix and match. Do get those backlinks, but also make sure you have those genuine mentions, not necessarily linked, if you want to kind of position yourself and want to make sure that once ChatGPT arises, you're also in a good position for that. Those were all the questions that I had before the webinar. Is there anything else that showed up as a question now that I was talking? Okay, it seems like we don't have any questions. Like I said, you will receive the recording of this webinar to your email addresses, as well as an invitation to set up a call with me if you want to talk further about your product or service. Thank you again for joining me today, and I hope you got some valuable insights from this.
Thank you
so much.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
See you.
Very
Thank you.
great and educational.
Thank you.